The past fortnight has placed Dulwich College at the centre of a political storm it neither sought nor invited. The allegations that Nigel Farage, as a pupil in the late 1970s, used racist and anti-Semitic slurs, sang abusive chants, targeted classmates, are distressing enough in themselves. Their emergence in the heat of a contentious political climate intensifies the scrutiny on both the individual concerned and the institution that once educated him. Yet the college's response reveals a deeper tension: how a prestigious school with a strong modern ethos manages painful claims drawn from a very different social and historic moment while protecting its present community and reputation. At the heart of this episode is a collision between memory and denial. More than 20 former pupils, including respected professionals such as Peter Edequi and David Edmonds, describe persistent racist, bullying, and openly anti-Semitic comments. They speak with a consistency that suggests shared experience rather than opportunistic coordination. Farage's defence oscillates between insisting he never directly racially abused anyone and claiming that any offensive remarks were banter, read differently today. His deputy, Richard Tice, escalated this by branding former pupils liars, only to soften his tone a few days later, a shift that hints at a recognition that categorical dismissal lacks credibility when so many voices align against the Reform UK leaders' narrative. Dulwich's initial silence drew criticism. Alumni who had spoken publicly wondered why the institution had not acknowledged either their distress or the seriousness of their claims. The letter released by the new master, Robert Milne, therefore marks an important institutional intervention. The tone is careful but not evasive. Milne describes the allegations as profoundly distressing and wholly incompatible with the values the college holds today. He expresses sympathy for former pupils who felt compelled to come forward and affirms that the Dulwich of the 2020s bears little resemblance to the environment described from the 1970s. That said, the college's rationale for its earlier silence invites scrutiny. Milne explains that Dulwich avoided public statements to protect its reputation in the long term. This is understandable, but also revealing. Schools, especially elite ones, are acutely conscious of brand, heritage, and continuity. Acknowledging historic wrongdoing by a famous former pupil is not simple, and nor is silence neutral. Dulwich's alumni community spans continents and generations. Many expect the school to model civic responsibility as well as academic excellence, and for them, moral clarity is a reputational asset, not a threat. The question now is whether Dulwich's statement goes far enough. The master affirms that such behaviour would be unthinkable in today's college and cites strong policies on equality, diversity, and anti-bullying. Good. But institutions cannot restrict their ethical horizon to the present. When significant numbers of former pupils describe distressing treatment that shaped their adolescence, the college has a duty not only to listen but to reflect publicly on why such conduct occurred in the first place, what norms allowed it to persist, and how those conditions have changed. I was talking to somebody the other day, and he was saying how he had been at school in quite an important school in the UK where there was active fagging, and this would have been in the 1980s. And perhaps early 1990s, and he was miserable there. And that is bullying. That is bullying, and certainly I have noticed that fagging continues in a number of schools that I've visited in the last 10 years. This is not about respective disciplinary action, it's about institutional accountability, historical honesty, and pastoral seriousness. Past students who endured abuse do not want a political intervention from Dulwich. They want recognition. They want their experiences, long buried, to be met with dignity rather than dismissed as nostalgia weaponized by political opponents. It's precisely here that Farage's own response looks weakest. His reframing of the issue as a politicised witch hunt ignores the fact that the allegations are being driven not by Labour strategists or media opponents, but by men who shared his classroom, who shared the corridors and dormitories with him. His attempt to pivot to cultural debates about television programmes from the era feels like misdirection and a clumsy one. It asks the public to conflate the experience of racist tropes in mainstream entertainment with the moral agency of a teenage boy making targeted personal remarks to his peers. The argument doesn't persuade. The wider political context compounds the problem. Farage is already under heavy criticism for calling multilingualism in Glasgow schools a form of cultural smashing. Councillors from across the political spectrum condemned those remarks as an attack on children, and their unity demonstrates how far public patience has worn thin with rhetoric that stigmatises minorities for applause. In that light, the Dulwich allegations land with even greater force. They shade into a broader narrative about the character, habit, and judgment that has emerged as the grown-up Farage from the youth. Voters naturally ask whether patterns from adolescence therefore echo in political adulthood, and they seem to. For Dulwich College, this moment is a test of institutional maturity. Milne has taken a necessary first step by acknowledging the seriousness of the claims, but the college must recognise that the maelstrom around Farage also exposes a question about its own historical culture. How a prestigious school of that era treated difference, and whether it fostered the sense of impunity that several alumni now describe. If Dulwich wants to stand firmly for its modern values, it must confront the shadows of its past, however uncomfortable. There is distress here, certainly, but distress doesn't absolve responsibility, and if the allegations are substantially true, then both Nigel Farage and Dulwich College must accept that the past exerts a moral claim on the present. The college's reputation will ultimately be strengthened not by guarded silence, but by transparent reflection, and Farage, if he wishes to retain public trust, must answer not with bluster or deflection, but with candour. Sometimes an apology, even for events half a century old, is not weakness, but the mark of someone willing to take ownership of their own past history.